Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation is the third installment in the Hotel Transylvania series, and this movie is about Adam Sandler going to a meeting at Sony and them telling him, hey man, I know you really like going on vacations in your movies, but I don't think we can do that for every single film you do. And then Adam Sandler said, wanna bet? So now his animated characters are now going on vacation as well. I like the first Hotel Transylvania movie. It's very predictable. Like, as soon as you watch like the first opening 5 minutes, you can kind of tell exactly what's gonna go down, but I thought there was a nice charm to the execution. And even though the sequel didn't need to be made, it still had a nice little charm to it too, even though it definitely was a step down in quality from it, but I still enjoyed both very much. This one I wasn't really that excited for. It just seemed like another unnecessary sequel, especially since the plot of this one was they're going on vacation on this cruise ship. Like, it seems straight to DVD territory, like the Ice Age films, where all of them feel like they should have gone straight to DVD, but instead they all went to theaters because the other installments made a lot of money, so we'll make more money off of this one. And even though Genndy Tartakovsky was back to direct the film, and he was also going to be taking a part in the screenwriting as well, I just still wasn't that interested to see this movie at all. It definitely seemed like it could end up being the worst one. And after walking out of this film, yeah, this is definitely my least favorite Hotel Transylvania movies out of the other two. That being said though, this is still a decent animated feature. Genndy Tartakovsky knows how to make a solid animated film out of this. He's done a lot of great works on TV, but these Hotel Transylvania movies, he's really good at making them just pretty good. It sucks that each film has kind of declined in quality for me, but I still got a lot of enjoyment out of this film. The animation style, of course, is spectacular. It's an animation style that only Genndy Tartakovsky can really nail, and you can tell, like, yep, that's something he'd do. He uses how the monsters look, their appearances, and their characteristics to make some really cool visual sight gags that I really enjoyed. There's a lot of clever moments here with the humor that I really liked. And even though there are a few moments where the jokes do resort to a little bit more kiddie, that there are still some jokes in there for families, and even some for the adults in the audience. So I thought this movie was still able to maintain its really nice charm with its animation style and its really clever humor, and also the character of Dracula continues to be one of Adam Sandler's best roles. I know that's kind of easy to say since a lot of his roles are terrible comedy roles, but this is actually a pretty good role for him still. 3 movies in and Drac's character is still going strong in my opinion. I really like what they did with him in this movie with the character Erica, who, if you've seen the trailer, he starts to get feelings for, or zings as they always refer to it in this movie, but of course she's a Van Helsing, so there's some issues there as well. I really like their relationship, and Kathryn Hahn also didn't bug me in this movie. Usually, she kind of bugs me in some movies that I see her in. She was fine in The Visit, but Bad Moms movies, I'm not a big fan of her in those, but in this one, she was pretty good as the role of Erica, and also Selena Gomez still continues to be really good as Mavis in this movie, and also Big Dad Van Helsing, played by Jim Gaffigan, which completely surprised me. I did not know he was going to be playing a character in this movie. I love Jim Gaffigan. He's a really favorite comedian of mine, but he also did a really good job playing Van Helsing. It was a nice thing to see these movies actually have a solid villain that's there from beginning to end. Quasimodo was technically an antagonist, but he wasn't necessarily the bad guy, and then in Hotel Transylvania 2, they just threw Rob Riggle in there for absolutely no reason in the last 15 minutes. It was nice to see them actually dedicate themselves to a villain, and I liked him in this movie. However, speaking of the characters I just mentioned, Mavis, Drac, and Erica, this kind of leads into one of my big problems with this movie and a huge disappointment about where the franchise has gone overall, is the overall theme of the film. Now, when I was watching this movie at first, I was thinking like, oh dang, so Drac and Erica are going to get together and Mavis isn't going to like this because she's filling in for her mother. If you don't know, from the first Hotel Transylvania movie, Drac's wife passed away, Mavis was like a baby at that point, and now in this movie, Drac has found a new love. He feels lonely, he wants someone else in his life, and Mavis doesn't know how to handle this. I thought this was going to be a really cool theme to see because not a lot of kids' films or animated films really focus on that, the idea of a new parent stepping in and actually really delving into the psyche of how a child could feel about that. And I was actually thinking like, okay, this could actually get really personal and really deep, and this is something that I can relate to, something other people can relate to. This could be really special. But then as the movie progressed, they were kind of taking this theme and they smashed it on the ground and swept it under the rug and instead pulled out the old stuff. The monsters shouldn't be persecuted, and just because they're different than you, you shouldn't discriminate against them. The same exact thing that they already mentioned 2 movies now, for 2 films, and I was completely disappointed in that. Because sure, not discriminating against people that aren't alike to you, that's a good theme to teach to children. You don't want children to grow up thinking it's okay to persecute against people that are different than them. It's obviously a good message for them to hear, but it's a message that we've heard for 2 movies now. We're 3 movies in. They're on a cruise ship, and they still have the exact same theme going. I'm just thinking, you changed up the setting from hotel to cruise ship. Maybe you can change up the message of the movie a bit, actually make it a little bit more impactful, a little bit more personal, especially to other people in the audience, and actually change up this film series and prove that you aren't just doing the exact same thing. And you can keep the fact that Erica is a Van Helsing and have this theme really play a huge part in the film. There's a few moments where I'm like, alright, they're getting into it, this is it. And then they kind of gloss over it and then move on and go back to the old stuff that everyone's used to. And I was just not a big fan of that overall. Because in Hotel Transylvania 2, it was a bit of a stretch having Drac basically learn the exact same message that he did in the last movie again. Even rewatching both of those movies recently, in Hotel Transylvania 2, they really do kind of backtread a lot of what Drac learned in that first movie just so they could have a new story. So seeing Hotel Transylvania 3 and they have another similar theme of don't persecute against monsters again, it's tiresome at this point. And sure, you have a lot of visual sight gags that are very entertaining to watch. This is a very watchable film, and it has a third act that is actually kind of clever. It's one of those third acts where they incorporate music into it, characters are dancing, but it goes into a direction that you wouldn't expect, and I thought it was a clever way of actually changing that up a bit. So I'll give this movie credit for a lot of its clever jokes that Genndy Tartakovsky was able to craft, its great animation style and visual appeal. But as far as screenwriting goes, this is definitely the weakest installment of the Hotel Transylvania movies because they're just relying on the old stuff again, kind of like Hotel Transylvania 2, except this time it's made even worse because the potential for a new idea is there, and they just don't go for it. It's like in Hotel Transylvania 2, for a while I thought Dennis is going to turn out to be a human and Drac is just going to have to live with it and actually learn from that. But then you find out, oh wait, Dennis had fangs all along, he's a vampire. It's fine. Drac learned something, but yay, he's happy that his grandson is a vampire. So I think they really messed up the potential in that one, but in this one they mess it up even more so, because that new potential theme that I mentioned is swept under the rug a lot more than in Hotel Transylvania 2. The potential in this film was right there. They could have exploited that potential to its maximum, but they didn't. They just ignored it. And that's what's really disappointing about this film overall. This movie also disappointed me whenever they cut to the side characters in this movie. Now, it was funny, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of visual sight gags that had me entertained. The visual style had me entranced in the film. It's very well made for an animated feature, but I just couldn't help but feel like that whenever they cut to the side characters, it was just there so they could pad the movie out a lot more. Definitely feels like a sequence of jokes after a while, and I was like, okay, are we gonna focus up on the plot at all? Are these subplots gonna come into play later in the film? Of course they don't. They're just there for a joke, and they're funny jokes, but it's like, you gotta work with me here. Are you trying to craft a good story, or are you just trying to craft something that's passable in the moment? And I was entertained by the characters, of course, and I liked them again because I liked them in the other 2 movies, but I just wanted something more and something new out of the third installment because the potential was right there. It's not one of those things where you're like, oh, well, it's the third installment of this series, that shouldn't be a series, what did you expect? The potential was there, it was right in front of them, and they didn't use that at all, and that's what's really disappointing to me. Another thing that was really disappointing to me was the fact that Jonathan, a character that I really enjoyed from the other 2 movies, Andy Samberg still plays that character very well, basically has nothing to do until the third act of the film. And for the longest time I was thinking, like, why is he even here? You're wasting Andy Samberg's time. And then the third act kicks in, it's like, okay, you have him doing something, but it still feels like you could have gotten anyone else to do it. So once again, why is Andy Samberg doing this movie again? Like, his character has no purpose. There's a subplot where Dennis and the werewolf girl have to sneak aboard their giant dog Tinkles onto the ship, this dog that was like in that short before the Emoji Movie, if you remember that. And at first, for the longest time, I was thinking like, okay, why is this happening? Like, could you just leave the dog at home, please? And then there was one part where I was like, oh, we're going somewhere with it. And then nothing happened with it, and I was like, okay. And then the third act kicks in, and you're like, okay, so the dog is basically just there to provide some extra support, I guess, but once again, it's something that another creature could maybe do. Like, we don't really need this giant dog for giant dog jokes, you know? Out of the Adam Sandler friends that played Dracula's friends in the movie, Kevin James as Frankenstein, he has the most to do, I guess. But it really is, it doesn't really come into play at all. Like I said, these characters' subplots that are only there for jokes don't come into play later as something important. Like, Frank has a gambling issue, so at one point he has lobster hands because he lost his hands. Why? Just because it's funny to see Frankenstein have lobster hands. Griffin, the Invisible Man, played by David Spade, nothing really to do in this movie, just more invisible jokes, and even then they kind of dropped that after a while. Keegan-Michael Key as Murray, the mummy. Once again, nothing else to do except tell some mummy jokes, and even then they dropped that after a while. In the other two Hotel Transylvania movies, it didn't seem like they were focusing a lot on other subplots to make sequences of jokes, but in this one, they do. So they're shining a flashlight more on these side characters that are pretty entertaining to look at and watch, but if they're not going to come into play later in the main plot, then what's the point of even having them do other stuff? You know what I mean? What's the point of even showing this? Oh yeah, you want a joke. The werewolf parents, played by Molly Shannon and Steve Buscemi, I think they were the most well-handled, because at one point they have to exit the film, but they explained it in a way that kind of made sense. I was like, okay, that's perfect. And they ended off with a nice joke that makes it all work. Perfect way to write those people, and then give them nothing to do. Everyone else has nothing going on, yet they have the spotlight on them every now and then, and it just kind of weighs the movie down overall as a story. There's a story here with Erica and Drac and Mavis that's not being fully realized. But despite some weak storytelling and also a complete waste of a new theme, something brand new to the series, I still had fun with this movie. Once again, Genny Tartakovsky really knows how to make an animated feature. The jokes, even though I do have my gripes with how they're implemented into the film, they are pretty funny. There's a Kraken that sings swing tunes, played by Joe Jonas, which caught me off guard, and I loved it. It was amazing to me. And I was also entertained by the villain, like I said earlier. Drac is also still good in this movie, and Mavis is still good, and Erica is also a new addition, and the other side characters are still fun to watch, so I can give this movie a pass, and I could see myself watching it again, but it's definitely the weakest in the Hotel Transylvania series. I'm gonna give Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation a B-. This definitely could have been a lot better, and the potential was there to make it better, and as an audience member, I could definitely see it in plain sight, like this is what you could have done, but instead they wanted to teach kids about not discriminating again, and I was like, alright, but we've seen this before. Can you try something new? Something a little more personal? Guess not. But at least this movie's better than the Hotel Transylvania TV show. Jesus Christ. But what did you think of this film? Leave it in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.